Welcome back to the show. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to continue our deep dive into the root causes of why we are the way we are and all of the issues and all the shit in our lives, which I love. Hopefully you'll like this, love this as much as I do as the episodes go on. And hopefully you'll start seeing things in your own life and pieces will start falling into place and maybe some breakthroughs, and you can go away. And I'd like you to go away in between episodes and really think about this stuff. As I say, it's been really interesting working with people one-on-one again and coaching them and just seeing the incredible breakthroughs that people can have by getting stuck into this. And I know from my own experience the changes that it can make. So I would encourage you as you listen to this, don't just listen and think, yeah, and go away. Listen, watch, and go and think about it. And I often talk to people about, I found myself saying to someone the other day, asking them about thinking, did you just think in your head? And they looked at me as if to say, what do you mean? And I know that sounds crazy when I say it, but what I've learned over the years is when we say we think about things, we often just things will just float around in our mind while we're busy doing other stuff. So we're busy going to work, running our days, looking after the kids, trying to keep other people in our lives happy, whatever it is. And we say, yeah, I was thinking about it. But that's not really thinking. Like, really thinking is stopping and sitting down. And I think actual true thinking is writing stuff down or talking about it. Because it's only when you'll have had this experience, you think about something and you go to speak to someone, and as soon as you say it out of your mouth, you go, it's all right, I've got it now, I've figured it out. And it's because when we go to write something down or speak something, our brain is forced to articulate it in a different way. It's forced to put it into language that makes sense rather than just bouncing around in our heads. So I do that. When you listen to or watch these episodes, go away and really put some thought into it. Go away and think, does this apply to me? Where does this apply to me? How is this affecting my life? What role is it playing in my life? And let me know if you have any breakthroughs, if it helps in any way. What I wanted to carry on talking about here is childhood, basically. And if you haven't watched the last episode, I'd go and watch that before you watch this or listen to this, because it's important. This sort of builds on one step on top of the other. What I wanted to say is, so we touched in the last episode on what it's like when we come out. We come out as a human and then as a blank canvas, and then we get programmed. And what I wanted to sort of reaffirm and reiterate on that is, think about, this is more about sort of the emotional side of who we are. Think about what kids are like when they first come into the world. So before they've been trained to do anything, think about their emotions. So when a child cries, think about a baby crying. They cry, like they fucking cry, they wail. Think about it. Think about the last time you saw a baby cry, either in person or on TV or on the internet, and compare it to the last time you saw a grown-up cry, and the difference between those two things. Just think about that for a second, just pause and think about it. Like, why has that changed? Why don't we cry like we did when we were babies now? We've been taught not to. Think about, go a little bit older. Think about when you see, and everyone's seen this, think about when you see a kid having a temper tantrum. I don't know why I always picture this in the middle of a supermarket. I think it's probably it's the most embarrassing time for an adult. Think about that. So a kid gets angry, a kid doesn't want to do something, a toddler. Just stop and think about what they do. They scream and they go red and they throw themselves on the floor and they kick their feet, they stamp their feet, they smack their hands on the floor. When was the last time you saw a grown-up do that? These are kids experiencing pure emotions. This is how we experience emotions before we get trained out of it. And think of the other end of the spectrum. Think about when a kid laughs. For anybody who's out there who doesn't love listen to the sound of a kid laugh, there must be something missing. Maybe we'll delve into that later on. For me, when you just need to hear kids laugh and it makes adults laugh, think about how they experience joy, just pure, unadulterated joy. And then think about how often adults laugh like that. I heard a stat once. It's something like the average child laughs 40 times a day. And think about when a kid laughs, a kid really, really laughs, like belly laughs, just experiences all that joy. But by the time you're grown up, you might laugh twice a day. And think about when a grown up laughs. Like even when we watch comedies, how often do you really truly belly laugh like a kid does? Not that often. And if you do, that's fantastic. It's one of the keys to life. But the point of talking about this is, I want you to think about the way we experience emotions when we first come into the world. So the way we experience our pure natural emotions before anybody does anything to us, before anyone teaches us anything, it's just raw. It's absolutely raw. And then what happens is, going back to the last video, we start interacting with the world. We start interacting with the people around us, with our caregivers, with society as we get older. And we start learning things subconsciously, usually. So no one ever, well, people very rarely tell us things directly, although in emotions, we do get told directly. So go back to the fear video, go back to the anger video. We do get told, don't cry. Think how often you say that to a kid. Don't cry, stop crying. Don't be afraid, don't be angry. There's no need to be angry. Don't be scared, there's nothing to be frightened of. So we slowly, I don't like the phrases positive and negative emotions, but that's the easiest way to talk about them. We'll get into this more and more, and you'll hear me keep coming back to this stuff. No such thing as a positive or negative emotion. The example I keep giving recently is, emotions are what they are, and they exist for a reason. So go back to when, before we lived in a big domesticated society with YouTube and phones and all the rest of it, when we were just walking around the jungle as pure raw humans. When we were faced with an attack by a lion, the appropriate emotions in that scenario are fear and anger. If you're getting attacked by a lion and you experience joy, you're dead. Like, that's it. You are mincemeat. You are fucked. You need to experience fear and anger so that you can get the fuck away, fight the lion, survive. That's the point. That's the point in the emotions. And it's appropriate to feel those emotions in those times. No different now. The difference is our brains are still wired from all that time ago when they were fixed for survival. When actually most of the time we don't need it for survival now, but the instincts are still the same, which is why we're always drawn to negatives. We always remember negative stuff. We look out for negatives. We're drawn to drama on the news. We're drawn to negative stories in the press. Goes back to the information, the assessment of truth videos. This is all ties in together. It's really important we understand this, and this is why it should be taught in schools, because as soon as we start to understand it, we can look out for it. We get exploited because the people who use this stuff to exploit us know that this is our psychology, know that this is our core emotion. So that's a slight tangent. I don't like positive and negative emotions, but that's what people call it. So we'll use those expressions for the sake of the stories. We get told to suppress our negative emotions. So fear, anger, sadness. Grown-ups say to us, don't do that. And actually, again, we'll get into this more and more. If you go to the base of that, adults generally tell us to do that because we're all uncomfortable around them. We're not good with emotions. This is one of the things, something I've learned over the past couple of years, is how to express my emotions better, how to feel my emotions, how to not be ashamed of my emotions. We live in a society where we are told to suppress them. We are taught to suppress them. There's a huge amount of shame in our societies. We raise our kids, going back to the last episode about programming and the production line. The sad thing is we actually use shame in our societies to raise our children, and we build societies around shame. And our emotions are then developed around that same topic. That's going to be another future video which we will delve into. So we're told, don't be angry, don't be afraid, don't be sad. And as time goes on, we start to suppress those emotions. But what nobody tells you is that your emotions come through the same tap. Think of it like this. So all of your emotions come through the same tap. The anger, the sadness, the fear, the joy, the happiness, the exhilaration, they all come through the same tap. But no one says, if you start turning off the negative stuff, in inverted commas, you can't help but turn off the positive stuff. So think about what I was saying before about kids. The kids experience all these emotions fully, absolutely fully to their max. And as they get older, think about the crying. You do not cry, or you very rarely cry as an adult the same way you would cry as a child. But in the same respect, you very rarely experience joy in the same way you do as a child. because it's all been squeezed. And I like to talk about this a lot now. You start out as a whole human being like this. This is fully human as you're born. And then over time, it's compressed and compressed, and you get squeezed into this bubble of a human, which is what we all become. And that ties into loads of other things. So to go back to the depression video, we've squeezed and we've repressed, depressed all of our emotions, the bad and the good. And then all of a sudden, we feel like we've got depression. We don't feel stuff the same ways we used to. But it's because we've been doing this the whole time. We've been squeezing it in. So we become less than a full human. And the reason we do this is because, again, something we all have in common, we have basic human needs. So emotional needs, psychological needs, things like the need for love and connection, the need for certainty and security in our lives, the need for safety. So when we're a child, we start to adapt our behaviour. We start to look at things around us and we think, okay, so if a grown up, if one of our caregivers, if the family around us, if the people that are bringing us up or raising us say to us, don't do X, so don't be angry, don't be sad, stop crying. What we hear as kids is, we don't love you. It's as simple as that. We don't love you as much. You are not worth as much if you do X, Y, or Z. So if you cry a lot, I don't love you as much. That's what we hear. Now, that's not necessarily what our parents are saying, and generally speaking, isn't what our parents are saying. What they're usually saying is, I don't like you very much when this happens. But as a child, we feel, this person doesn't love me as much. So I need to adapt that behaviour. So we start slowly over time to adapt things. So we twist and we turn and we mould our personalities, the human that we are, not to be our true selves, but to be an adapted version of ourselves. So an adapted version that fits in to the world we were born into. Because we are brilliant creatures. This is the thing about, I am fascinated by human beings. We are an incredible machine. Our mind and body, some of the stuff, I'm going to start slowly talking about some more sort of crazy stuff, and I am purposefully sort of slowly integrating it into the conversation because I am conscious that some of this stuff will make me sound like I'm insane. So hopefully as we ease into it, it will make more sense. And I am also conscious, and I will keep saying this, that if me now was talking to me from 3 or 4 years ago, then me from 3 or 4 years ago would think that I'm insane. The stuff I believe now, the things I've learned, the things I've seen with my own eyes and felt, it all makes perfect sense. It goes back to the logic point. I think this is all very logical as you start working through. So one of the things as you're doing this, is if you think about this doesn't work as well on a podcast, I'm moving my hands closer together from an out, like picture a big egg shape that's getting squeezed into the middle. Think about if you did that with a human, like if you physically squeezed someone into a small human body, imagine that you might start getting some health issues with that. Imagine that you might start getting some inflammation issues. So think about that. You're a big human and we get squeezed into a smaller body, and maybe our skin might start trying to burst out, or our insides might start to burst out. That's a taster for future sessions. We'll come on to that more and more. So you've got these human needs. And go back again, you've come into this world, it's traumatic, you need these people around you to survive. This is the world you're born into. So whoever you feel like you are deep inside, whoever that person is, unless the environment around them says, just be that person, just be whoever you are inside and everything will be fine. Unless that happens, we adapt. And the reality is, no matter how well you were raised, and again, this is no blame on parents, this is a perfectly natural thing that happens. No matter how good you are, no matter how much, even if you've learned all this stuff, you will damage your children. I heard a great story. My therapist told me this. There's a doctor called Gabor Mate, who's written loads of books, and he's been interviewed on loads of big podcasts, the Tim Ferriss show. I think he's been on Joe Rogan. He's brilliant. And he talks about all this stuff, and my therapist went to see him live presenting to a room full of therapists, and he said at the start of this session, I get asked this a lot by therapists especially, and I just wanted to get out the way and answer it early on. People always ask me, am I fucking up my children? And he said, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, just to clarify it for you, yes, you are fucking up your children. Like, it can't be helped. This is just the way it is. No matter how much work we do on ourselves, like I've been working a lot on myself for the past 2 years. I'm still learning things every day, every week, every month. I'm still having breakthroughs. I expect to be having these breakthroughs on my deathbed. I can imagine lying there and thinking, shit, I've just figured something out. Taking me however many years, 80, 90 years, if I live that long. So no matter what you do, you are going to pass things down to your kids that are, damaging is probably the right word without being too dramatic. It's traumatic with a small t, going back to the last video. It's stuff that they will have issues with, they will develop, because ultimately their true self is different to your true self. One of the things we do when we have kids, I think, is we want them to be a little version of us. And they are in many, many ways. You look at kids and you see them, and as I say, I haven't got my own, but I see other people's. Got a niece and nephew I love to bits, and you see them, like I see bits of me in them, definitely see bits of their mum and dads in them, their grandparents, but they're their own individual people. So whilst there are bits of the people around them, and especially their parents, their true self is different to everybody else. So it's really difficult to create an environment in which they can just be their true selves. So I say to lots of people now, the best thing you can do for your kids is put money aside now, so that when they're late teenagers in their early 20s, they can go and see therapists and start sorting all this shit out early on, and not wait till they're 40, not wait till they're mid-30s, mid-40s to start getting into this. Because if you can sort it out when you're 20, you're going to be miles ahead of everybody else. You're going to be live such a good and fulfilling life. So this is all really normal and natural stuff. This is not a beat up your parents conversation, because remember, the same thing happened to them, and that's why they've passed it down to you. And the same thing happened to their parents and their parents before. So this is no one's fault. It'd be interesting to go back through time and figure out when this all started and why. But as the world changes, obviously we live in a complex world now. We live in a society that our brains especially are not really built for. We're still adapting. They're millions of years old and still adapting to all this shit. So we are slowly changing our true self. Think of that. So this comes back to, always can come back to core principles. What are we talking about this for? We're talking about this because ultimately I think that what we're all looking for in life is not money and not material possessions and not success in the way that the Western world looks at success of fame and fortune and all the stuff we've been raised with. That's not what I believe anymore. And I've been through all that. I've done all that. And, I've never been completely rich and famous and all the rest of it, but I've had a taste. I've made money. I've run companies. I've felt special. I've had publicity and all that stuff. And I know even with that taste of it, it doesn't satisfy you. It doesn't give you what you think it will. And you see people, miles ahead of that, rich, famous people who kill themselves, who commit suicide. It's tragic, but it's because this stuff still applies to them. They keep going up. I see billionaires being interviewed now, and I see it in them. They do not feel worthy. They do not feel good enough. And it's because that voice inside them, the true self, is still not being allowed to come out. That is the little thing inside us, the bit that's inside us that's saying, is this all there is? Like, I've done all the things I was meant to do. I got a good job, I worked hard, I've got married, I've had kids, I've got a house, I've got divorced, I got another wife or husband, I've had multiple partners, I've had multiple jobs, I keep changing my job, I'm still not happy. I've made money, I'm still not happy. I've got pay rise, I'm still not happy. What's this voice? For me, and again, we'll get stuck into more and more of this, for me, that is the truth. That's your true self inside you. That's your subconscious saying, what about me? What happened to me? Where did I go? And this is the big question. The big question becomes, who are you? Who are we? Because we talk about us, me, bouncing through life. But who are we really? Who is the real you? There's a few things have happened to me, and a story came up today actually when I was chatting to someone in a coaching call. I remember it was when I was running my law firm, and years before that, in the biggest law firm I'd ever worked at, there was one, I can't name him and I won't name the firm, but there was a senior equity partner in one of the departments. So really wealthy, really powerful, really high up, and everyone hated him. Everyone who worked there hated him, thought he was an arsehole, miserable bastard. And years later, when I'm running my firm and someone came to work with me and we were going out and we were networking and we were chatting to clients, trying to bring them on board. And every time we mentioned the firm we'd been at previously, these clients would say to us, "Oh, do you know X, this guy?" And we'd say, "Yeah." And we'd be really polite. And they'd say, "Oh, what a guy. What a guy he is. He is such good fun. We love him. We love him to bits. We play golf with him. We go on lads' weekends away with him." And I remember me and this lad used to leave those meetings because we'd just have to go along with it. We'd be like, "Oh yeah." We weren't going to say, "Really, he's a fucking arsehole," we think. And we used to leave those meetings and we'd be like, "I can't believe they're talking about the same person. It's like they're talking about two different people." Fast forward years later to when I was running my law firm, I got to a point 4 or 5 years in where on a day-to-day basis, I was miserable. I was depressed. I didn't want to go into the office. I couldn't have been very nice to be around. Even my physical appearance was, I was overweight. I was drinking too much. I was eating unhealthily. I wasn't looking after myself. I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. And I had this moment one day where I thought, I've turned into him. I've turned into this partner who everyone hated. And in my head, I'm still fun-loving me. I'm the guy who goes out with my mates and has a laugh and gets drunk, and exactly what these people were describing to us. He's fun-loving, he's great to be around. And I'm sure even for my mates, things had started to change around them, maybe. But I realised that in my head, that the person I am is this person, the fun person. But in reality, I'm spending 12 to 14 hours a day as this miserable bastard, 6-7 days a week. So who am I really? Which of these characters am I really? And that's an interesting question for all of us. Like, who are we? Self-awareness is a really big key in all of this. And I often say to people, I used to think back then that I was self-aware. I used to talk about it. I hear people talking about it online all the time. Be very, very careful if you describe yourself as self-aware, or if you hear somebody describing themselves as self-aware, because self-awareness is a really tricky thing. I always used to say to people about self-belief. People would say to me, because it always looked like I had loads of self-belief, and that is true to a certain degree, but it was more my ego, which we'll talk about. But people would say to me, how do you get so much self-belief? And I'd say to them, the clue is in the name, self-belief. You just give it to yourself. No one else can give it to you. It's got to be from you. And the irony is that with self-awareness, it's completely different. If you think you are self-aware, but it is just based on what you think, it's bullshit. Because that's what I used to think. The story you tell yourself, going back to the stories, is just a story. You can only have true self-awareness by speaking to other people and asking them who you are. I did a Myers-Briggs test once. I don't know whether you've heard of that. It's like an in-depth personality test. Some people claim they're really flawed. I did it for a hedge fund, which a whole completely different story, but a hedge fund in New York that I was speaking to a few years ago. And I did this test and it came out with all these results. And they said to me, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Good results, basically what we're looking for. And I said to them, yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because you just answer loads of questions about yourself. I said, this test doesn't tell you who I am. This test tells you who I think I am. And even at the other end of the phone, these people in New York, I could hear them say, yeah, you're right. You're right. This isn't a test of who I actually am. This is about what my perception of myself is. And that might be way off. And it often is. As we go through these episodes, you might start to see just how far off your self-perception is from the reality. Because the reality is, we don't like to look at the dark side of us. This is a really big topic we'll get stuck into. But again, we'll ease into it. The shadow self, which you'll hear people reference. But for me, like the dark side of your personality, none of us like to admit it. None of us want to look at it. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of courage to do it. Speaking from experience, it can not be a pleasant thing sometimes. But self-awareness can only come through asking other people, through working with third parties, through getting people to test you and say to you, is that true? And this comes back to true self. Who are we really? And often when we're not happy in life, my perception, my understanding, and again, I might not be right, but this is my interpretation of it. Often when we're not happy, when we're not content, when we're not peaceful, it's because we are not living true to ourselves. We are not our true self. We are living as an adapted version of ourselves. We're living as a compressed version of ourselves. So we're not experiencing the full range of emotions anymore. We can't experience that joy like the kids do because we don't experience the other side, the emotion, the sadness and the fear and the anger, because we turn it off because we're afraid of it, the darkness. And this step by step is starting to identify where we came from, who we were when we were born, who we were when we were little kids, what was our training, what was our programming, where do our flaws come from? Can we look at our flaws? Can we look at our darkness? I'll help you do that more if you want to. This is a very, very personal choice, even if you're sort of working one-on-one with therapists and coaches. So you might not want to do any of that stuff as we go on, but I'll talk about it and you can decide for yourselves. But this is the question. Who are we really? And who do we want to be? If you could be anybody in the world, if you could do anything in the world, no limitations, forget money, forget excuses, forget time, forget, oh, well, I've got kids and I've got responsibilities and I've got a mortgage and I've got a job. If you could be anyone, who are you really? What are the things you've buried from your past? And an exercise I do with people, which is worth you doing, is if you're trying to figure out, people often say to me when they want to change their business or change their career or change what they do, but I don't know what I want to do anyway. And I often say to people, there's loads of work we can do on that, but I often say to people, go back to your childhood. What did you love doing when you were a kid? That's deep inside you, instinctively. It's amazing what you can find out. So that's the point of this. Think about being a kid. Think about those expressions. Think about the things you've switched off over the years. Think about what you learned again, building up on the last episode. Think about what you were taught by the people who raised you. What was acceptable, what wasn't. When you see those people now, you'll start, if you become aware of it, this is again, core principle. Noticing things, noticing your own thoughts, noticing your own behaviour, noticing your own emotions. When you interact with other people, your parents especially, the family around you, notice how you react now. Not how you think about it, but how you feel about it. Because we've created these characters. The next episode we'll lead into nicely. We've created these characters to survive. But who are we really? Who do we really want to be if we could take off all of these shackles? I'll leave it there. Let me know what you think. As always, share it if you like it. Throw it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Send it to a mate. Let me know what you think in the comments. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Take care.